So we're to a point where Tim West is going to be introduced. We're really pleased to have him here. So he's a chef turned entrepreneur, a title that I really like. Used to work as a chef for tech companies in the Silicon Valley, but took a few new direction a few years ago and started hosting food hackathons and consulting on the future of the food industry. Tim, the floor is yours.
It is a real honor and pleasure to come travel across the top of the globe and accept the invite. I need to first admit that I was the jet-lagged American this morning that asked the president, "What are you doing here?" Only because it is so hard for me to imagine that my politicians would care as much about what I do and what we all do and why we're all here today. So I truly am humbled to join you and share a little bit about my story and speak to this theme of hacking the food business. I'll share with you a little bit about my story, a few anecdotes, and then I have a special invitation for you all. And this here is a large part of the food business in the United States. This product is the Doritos Locos Taco from Taco Bell. And it has come to symbolize so much for me of what is wrong with our food system. Who here has had food poisoning before? Anybody? A few of you? Really no fun. I mean, you have a cleaner food system than we do, but my freshman year at college, I finally leave the house. I get to the University of Colorado in Boulder, Colorado, and I had no idea how to cook. I would go out to eat, and one day ended up earning myself some food poisoning. I ended up calling it kind of my first food epiphany, because after 3 days of being sick, I vowed to myself to learn where my food came from. So I called my twin brother, who at that time was in culinary school at the Culinary Institute of America in New York. I said, "Chris, how do you cook chicken?" And I got a pan hot. I threw some chicken in the pan. Sure enough, it was cooked. I sat down to enjoy this chicken, and there was a knock on my door. And it was my friends from down the hall who had smelled this chicken and wanted me to share. And it was kind of at that moment where all of a sudden I'm sitting with 10 people laughing and enjoying food that I realized that if I learned to cook, something I'd never been taught in school, that I'd make more friends, that I'd be healthier, that I could travel the world and come to Iceland and make a whole bunch more friends. And that's when I really decided to go to culinary school. But there's this kind of question that I was asking, was like, why is real food, good food, so expensive in the US? And it's kind of a question that has been perpetually coming through and has driven my exploration of where our food comes from and how do we actually transition to a better food system, and why is fast food so cheap? So I asked somebody. Click. This is my grandfather, Arch West. He is widely credited with creating one of the most successful snack foods, if you can call Doritos food, in the world, Doritos. And this food, this chip, if I really want to look at this chip, there's this great new book that just came out called The Dorito Effect. And what Doritos did is they kind of found that perfect balance of salt, fat, and sugar that achieved this bliss point that made people kind of uncontrollably eat these chips. They're delicious, but they made them shelf stable. And shelf stable means nutrient void, so there's really no nutrients in these. So they're sending these chips all around the world. They're displacing real quality food all around the world. And again, this was kind of a huge awakening for me of how I had come from this, but there's something brilliant in what he had done. He had found an industry that would never be obsolete and really, never be truly outsourced. So I decided to follow, this problem, looking at the problem, and started to look at it in a different way. Captain Jack Sparrow said the problem is not the problem is your attitude toward the problem. So I shifted my attitude to the problem, and I decided I wanted to actually go to culinary school and join my brother. Whoops, excuse me. So I went to the Culinary Institute of America in New York, one of the premier culinary colleges, and I actually discovered the slow food movement at culinary school as I began to learn. Who here is familiar with slow food? You basically all are, right? It's awesome not being in the States. And it was back then that I really dove deep and started organizing students, and I couldn't really even get students interested in going to farms at CIA, but you know what I could get them interested in? Beer. What they were doing instead of coming to farm tours was they were drinking beer. So we organized this amazing event. We appealed to their self-interests and began teaching them about local beer. And then that was kind of a really important lesson for me as I was going through this journey. And without even knowing it, really beginning to learn what hacking was and kind of hacking culture. And I'll get to hacking a little bit later. But I began to continue to follow that energy and that passion for wanting to learn more about our food system out, and in 2008 made my way to San Francisco, the land of opportunity. And this here is an eat-in. It's a sit-in potluck. It's kind of a form of political protest that we adapted, where we set up a table in a public place. And we, the youth food movement, we kind of called ourselves, organized about 250 young people to prepare a meal and demonstrate the way that we really wanted to eat and share a community. And I roasted a pig, a 300-pound pig, right in the park, which apparently you're supposed to get a permit for, and the cops came. But I fed them, pigs to pigs. I thought it was kind of funny. But they let us continue with it, and I really felt like we were doing something right. And we hadn't asked permission, and it was kind of in that moment that actually my twin brother and I got invited to Terre Madre in Torino, Italy. This is kind of, I call it the United Nations of Food. It's Slow Food's World Meeting of the Food Communities that happens every 2 years in Torino, and this is 7,000 delegates in 2008, with 2,000 youth from all around the world that have come together, and all of a sudden I kind of found my tribe. I realized that there's people on this planet from all corners that care as much as I do about building a better food system. And it catalyzed something for me. I wanted to come back to the US and instigate food revolution. So I came to UMass, the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And I chose UMass for a few reasons. One, they have the largest self-operated food service in the country, doing about 50,000 meals a day. Two, they had a young sustainable food systems degree, and some really cool professors that were pushing the boundaries. And three, I really wanted to kind of organize around this kind of climate change theme. Climate change seemed to be a theme that in the US was a conversation that people were really willing to have. And the American colleges and universities presidents had signed this climate commitment to kind of achieve carbon neutrality and write these climate action plans. So I actually organized here to create a garden, a permaculture garden, where the students are working to transition the land and grow food that goes back to the students at kind of a subsidized cost. And what we ended up building out of it was really a goal to revitalize the land-grant university system. And UMass is the land-grant of Massachusetts. And this is each state was given 30,000 acres with the charter to ensure agricultural security in the U.S. And they had very much moved away from this. And there's one quick anecdote I want to share about this, because we as the students began organizing and going through, and I was finding other professors and so forth, and finally went to the chancellor and asked if we could have this land, it was just grass, to build this garden, and he said, no, we need more parking on campus. And little did he know, I got really frustrated with that, but I did something. I found out that his wife took his kids to the dining hall on Tuesdays at 7:30. So I went in and talked to his wife, and she got all excited about this idea. I said, but your husband wants to make a parking lot. Well, wouldn't you know it, when we applied for President Obama's Champions of Change Challenge and won as the most innovative idea in college campuses in the US, that's the chancellor top right, that wanted to go to the White House. But it was right about then that I actually got this invitation. I got this invitation to come out and cook at the Facebook headquarters. And when I was at the St. Regis in New York cooking, I dreamed about coming to California where these companies were so forward-thinking, and reading about how Google was serving sushi on surfboards to hackers, and Facebook, it was kind of this young company pre-IPO. And I went out and I left everything in Massachusetts and dumped my girlfriend and moved to California with this dream. And this is me on the line. That's Katy Perry right there. And she was eating my nachos. I think she liked it. But there was something I saw at Facebook that was so much more magical than nachos or Katy Perry. It was this optimism and this mentality of we can create something different and challenge the status quo. And Facebook was using these hackathons. This is the first place I really got, even really understood the word hacking to be more than just breaking into somebody's email or stealing their password. I actually learned that the origin of hacking comes from the word hacksaw. And it was after World War II that the pilots were flying back broken planes that had been shot up to San Francisco or to the US, and they would kind of crash land these planes, and the engineers would take hacksaws and literally hack apart the planes. They would take something broken apart and they would put it back together in a new way that made it more efficient. And I thought that was really interesting, taking something broken apart and putting it back together. And somehow I ended up getting invited to a hackathon on a bus on the way to a conference. And we miraculously ended up coming up with this silly idea for a custom cereal company, which won the largest hackathon in all of South by Southwest. So I realized that all of a sudden, if you throw a bunch of people into a bus in this case, but into a room with this constrained period of time with a goal and a challenge, that magical things kind of come out of that. The necessity is the mother of invention. So I decided to take this own idea into my own hands and combine food and tech. This is the first food hackathon where I, inspired by Paul Cézanne's quote, "One day a single carrot, freshly observed, will start a revolution," decided to put on a hackathon. Never had done it before, but wouldn't you know it, 250 people showed up from 5 different countries, and we were off and running. A year later, I organized my second food hackathon at the Tagged headquarters. We had 350 people from 15 countries all showing up. All of a sudden, I was hearing that people were doing hackathons in Italy, and National Geographic ended up doing a hackathon. I even heard McDonald's did a food hackathon. And it seemed like kind of combining this idea of rapid iterating, of working together, was something really magical. So this is the third one we did in San Francisco, then combined with the launch of the Food Business School from the Culinary Institute of America. And I'm going to show a little quick video of what's come out of it. And, you'll see a little bit of the energy that we've been building. We are here to learn, to share, to collaborate, to ideate. We are here to do good, to have fun, and to make friends. Welcome to the Food Hackathon and Forum.
We have folks from the tech sector, designers and developers, people coming from university, people with science backgrounds, people from the food startup world, just meeting each other for the first time, getting together in a room and just going for it.
Throughout this weekend, we're going to participate in this marathon of hacking, of building, of creating, of prototyping, of taking ideas to reality that improve the food system. If anything's ever going to change, everybody needs to be at the table.
The new generation of food entrepreneurs should have a lot of vision and responsibility. They need to think about the way to produce food in a sustainable way and to produce food that is nutrition.
People don't know what they're putting in their bodies. Even if they think they're eating healthy, sometimes they're not doing it. And it's a matter of getting information into people's hands. And I think technology is the way to enable that.
And so if we could make people understand that the food they eat is so much a part of the health that's going to last them their entire lives, then that would be a great breakthrough.
What's great about a hackathon is it's kind of like organized serendipity. It brings together a lot of people with common interests and common values and puts them together in kind of a concentrated space for 2.5 days to work on solving a problem together.
Today we are creating a food and drug interaction safety app that tells you what foods to eat and what foods to avoid while on medication.
And every now and then, something magical happens and an idea actually turns into a company.
Check. So this was about a year ago that we pulled together this event of organized serendipity. And people ask me all the time what comes out of hackathons. Do companies come out of hackathons? They can, but what really comes out of hackathons is what we're all experiencing here today. It's that cross-pollination. It's the sharing of ideas. It's the working together to kind of find ways for us to work together to really just be more responsible with the resources we have to bring healthy food to the world. And I had spent so many years kind of fighting the system as a young activist, and I came to realize, as I said, it's only ever going to change if everybody's at the table. And it was a lot of students from UMass Davis came out, and it was at UMass Davis, the land grant from California, University of California, Davis, that I met the Mars guys. Mars being the largest privately held food company in the world, and they just invested in this innovation institute for food and health. And I began bringing them to the table, and Quaker came to the table, and Nestle's come to the table. And now I've begun really bridging these gaps between the kind of startup entrepreneurial world and the corporate world, because we know that these corporations, in large part, at least in my US-centered perspective, run a huge part of the food on the planet, and they have this amazing knowledge. And what I've learned is they want to change. They want to bring better food to the world at large. But they're big kind of cruise ships. They can't move the same speed as some of these startups can. But we can learn together. So when we throw everybody in a room together and everybody's working and cross-pollinating, and that's where the magic happens. That's where, when we have a diversity of perspectives in the room, that we get that real magic. But the question is really why? And the why comes down to this. So I've been speaking on this topic of the future of food and studying this topic of the future of food for a long time now. And this is the future of food. Infant nutrition, mothers educating them about healthy choices, I think is the single most important thing we can do, empowering women entrepreneurs in that space as well. And it's one of the reasons why I've decided to theme my next hackathon on kids' health. And I've decided to do it Halloween weekend in San Francisco, so that's end of October this year. And this is the first time actually even announcing it, and I want to invite anybody who's interested in continuing to build cross-boundary relationships to continue to do so out in San Francisco, because I'm essentially traveling around to all of the networks that I've been building and inviting them to do the same, and it's going to be a pretty exciting weekend for a few reasons. One, we may elect President Trump. It's a big political weekend. If the president was still here, I wanted to really invite him to come run because it seems like there's an opportunity in the States. Kids are beyond politics. I mean, kids, it appeals to all of us. And I really want to use this as a huge opportunity to have these conversations that we need to have about what it's going to take to grow the future generations. This is my niece and nephew that always keep time for the judging. So come on out and I invite you to collaborate. Thank you very much for having me.